that the context in which all questions about Israel are being asked itself is being manipulated.
So you don't even know who the manipulator is and who's being manipulated?
No, but you know that there is a hand behind the veil, as they say.
You betcha there is.
For whatever reason, it doesn't want people poking too closely into all things Israeli, Zionist, etc., and so it's trying an emotional equivalent of a Project Blue Book. And the Project Blue Book its whole goal was to provide a point of ridicule for all UFO reports such that we have an emotional tie, a shame issue, if you will, tied between UFO reports and the people who do it. Therefore, they won't do it because they'll be shamed by society. Now we're getting the same kind of pressure being applied to the Israeli question, only they're not able to or content with applying ridicule to it, and so they've gone for the deep and dark hate. They want you to be suspected instantly of being a hate crime person in some way for being anti-Israeli. And actually what they're trying to do is to instantly rephrase it so that you're not anti-Israeli, which defines a geopolitical arrangement, but they want you to be anti-Jewish, so it'll be something that truly is the hate crime. So it's all the linguistics are getting all messed up deliberately.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting, because if indeed so many of our strings are pulled by the Israeli powers that be, then you would almost say that what you just said, Cliff, could be the antithesis of what is really going on, but because possibly these people who, if it's true, would have the ability through their propaganda, through their fear-mongering or what have you, to manipulate the Webbot runs.
Very difficult. The reason is that we really don't, I mean, I hate to put it so bluntly, but we really don't care much what people think.
Okay, because it is dealing with the subconscious mind.
Exactly. What we do is this. When the run goes through and, for instance, hits a garden discussion forum, and it finds something that is in our hit list, our pattern-seeking algorithm.
Right.
It doesn't actually, we actually have to go to some trouble to read the words that are underlying the messages that we receive and process. What we really end up with here in terms of the processing is a whole slew of 4-digit hex numbers. These 4-digit hex numbers are processed mathematically because they relate to a numeric value assigned to a particular grid reference, and within that grid reference is a definition for an emotional value. Then we tie it back. That's how we derive our archetypes.
Yeah, right.
And I want to see, for instance, 50,000 references to something before I consider it to be a serious rising aspect, if you will.
That's still incredible. That's just mind-boggling to me how that works.
It's really nothing. The computers do all of that sort of stuff. It just took us a long time to set up. That's all.
Jeez. Okay, then in that whole sequence of events or potential events, do you get a date, let's say, number one, if and when Bush will, and I'm trying to phrase it in such a way, but will no longer be in office?
No, we don't get that kind of thing. What we get at this point is the vaguest of guesses that the next 6 months are going to be really bad, and that within that really bad context, a whole lot of it's going to be economic, and it's going to get a lot worse than it is now, and that a whole lot of it's going to be geopolitical or political and legal, and it's going to get a lot worse than it is now. Therefore, the likelihood is, and that's where we come into the interpretation.
The 6 months that you said are really going to be bad, is that from now, or is that from the December event?
That's really effectively starts December 14th. If you will, the last week in October is the last of this little emotional building period. So we'll build tension here up to like October 30th. And then we'll have a couple of little jitters, that is to say, little minor release events where something actually happens, right? And everybody's, ooh, something happened today. And they can discuss it, but it's not a big something because they won't be discussing it for 6 or 8 months. But a bunch of these little somethings are going to occur over this plateau period of November with a couple of nice big things in there. And then we hit December, and then it's all downhill from about 14th on.
Jeez. For 6 months?
Yeah, and then we'll have a small building period, and then we start the whole process over, only the scale is much more magnified. the building period is much sharper, the emotional tension is much higher, and the release period is on the order of, say, 20 to 30 times what we're dealing with over these next 6 months.
My God, Cliff.
I know. It's like, you can beat me up for being a messenger with bad news. I agree.
Holy
but what we
cow.
apparently are looking at
Yeah.
is energy being put into a waveform such that that waveform oscillates the longer in duration that it goes, and that the oscillations get much higher.
But you have no idea what the events, plural now, what the events might be, the December event and then 6 months later.
No. Well, we might get a hint later, part 3 or so within the run here. We might really get a hint as to what we're looking at in December, because we'll be getting some immediacy values that will go to that period of time.
Holy cow. Is it possible that information that you are picking up could be confused or change the mix of another event that you thought you were watching, but the information was really referring to a secondary event?
Sure. Because, like, using George Ure's analogy, we've got all these movies all showing on the same screen, and
Sure.
many of them in different languages. We're not even sure who's talking to who in what film. That certainly could be the case. And I frequently hope that it is.
Yeah, because of some of the stuff that you're saying is enough to scare the you-know-what out of you.
Yeah, my bladder's pretty dry most of the time.
Man alive. I mean, Cliff, if it, and I know you're not kidding, if it affects you as strong as you're saying,
Yeah.
how could it affect, let's say, a normal person?
Well, thanks, Guy.
Well,
That's it. I'm just joking. Well, there's a whole lot of that. I mean, that's why, we're very careful here. That's why this is not free. That's why it's not just generally available.
Yeah.
Besides the economic aspect of it, costs us a fortune to do this in bandwidth, and we've got to pay for it some way. There's also the other issue is that we're deliberately trying to make this difficult to obtain because, A, we don't want to pollute our source. We've done that before, and it screwed up the model for months.
Okay.
And B, the issue is that, I mean, I don't want to sound melodramatic or whatever, but I think you got to get your brain prepared before you jump into stuff like this, and it would be a disservice to just splash it all out.
Jeez. Do you foresee?
I mean, for a second, let's stop on that point there, because I mean, at a personal level, that's very important to me. I remember years ago having a discussion with my step-grandfather, who lived in this area prior to World War I. That is the same Pacific Northwest. He was up in the Fort Lewis area, I believe. But in any event, he had a brief conversation with me once, and I asked him, well, I'm sorry, World War II. And I asked him, well, what was it like? And he said, I knew it was coming. And I said, yeah. And he said, I knew 4 or 5 years before it happened it was coming. And I started getting things ready.
4 or 5 years?
Yeah, he could see the winds blowing, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And we had people in 1933 saying, well, there's going to be a horrific war that's going to involve the United States 7 or 8 years from now. And people knew in the 20s, and were writing about it. So
wow,
their minds were prepared to be able to visualize the patterns and pick the patterns up. And I don't want to be responsible for shoving something out there that somebody's not prepared to deal with.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's fair. In the reading of the different bits of information, is it possible that the people, and we've actually talked about this before, and it gets into some of the work that even Bill Tiller, the physicist, is doing, and that is that we can create our own reality. Is it possible that through these images that we are projecting out from the subconscious mind, that we are creating the reality of what is coming upon us in future years?
Well, it's certainly possible. Do I know? No. I have no real knowledge of universe at that level in terms of, I have no sure and certain knowledge. I do have some suspicions that at this point I would like to think that, say we got a particular set of data and we were really convinced that Yelm, Washington was going to get hit by a meteorite and driven 100 feet into the ground, right?
Yeah.
And we're absolutely convinced, and so we run out the 50, 80 miles out to Yelm, and and I get a bunch of my friends, and we stand around with signs, and we get everybody in the town to move away. Well, at the time we picked up the data, we get the emotional impact of a meteorite hitting Yelm, and so we think, ooh, a meteorite's going to hit Yelm, and it's going to kill everybody that lives there. And this is the emotional impact that we're receiving.
Yeah.
But then we alter the course of things, if you will. I don't know that we would really have altered it, but we go on out and we stand around and we convince everybody in Yelm that we're not nutcases, or at least we may be correct even if we are nutcases, and they go running off and they hide in the hills, and the meteorite comes down and it just smacks an empty town and kills a bunch of chickens. Okay, but in both cases, the emotional value might be the same.
Oh, okay. All right.
Because everybody running around getting all emotionally whipped up about it before the event might have the same level of emotional impact as everybody getting squished by the meteorite